Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we will be talking about the suitors of Blair Cornelia Waldorf. Blair is an icon. The first time I was watching Gossip Girl as a kid, I hated Blair. I feel like as a child I was low-key a pick-me, but I feel like everybody was. I was like, oh, I hated Pink, I hate Twilight, just so I could be different. But in reality, I was the same. And there's no shame in that. But when I was watching Gossip Girl as a kid, when I was in high school, I was like, oh my god, I hate Blair. Why is she always at odds with Serena? Serena is the perfect little cute little blonde. I love her, but that's what they want you to think. She tries to give this good girl persona when in reality, she's a bad person just like the rest of them. But the thing with Blair is that like she's a bad person. She's very classist. She's very elitist, but she doesn't try to hide it. And that is what I love about Blair. Born with several gold spoons in her mouth, she is the epitome of the New York elite. She's the epitome of New York high society. Blair knows who she is and she knows her worth. And as a result, she tends to go for extremely powerful, wealthy men, from princes to lords to billionaires. And Dan Humphrey. So let me introduce you to the Waldorf clan. The Waldorf clan includes Ms. Eleanor Waldorf. She's the owner of Waldorf Design. She's a beautiful fashion designer. We have Blair, of course. She is the girl boss of all girl bosses. And we have, am I blocking? No, I'm not. My head isn't that big, okay? We have Harold, who is a lawyer. They were married for a while. They had one child, Blair. However, they broke up when Harold ran away with a male model, I believe, and now he lives in Paris. So Blair lives with her mother in Manhattan, but she also lives with Dorota. This is her beautiful maid slash mother low-key, because let's be honest, Dorota raised this girl. Let's be fucking for real. So let's move on to the men, because this is what y'all came here for. So these are all of Blair's evil boyfriends, and I will get into exactly why I think they're evil in a second. But we have Chuck Bass, billionaire and heir to Bass Industries. We have Dan Humphreys, a poor writer. Wait, who's this man again? This is Marcus. He's a British lord. We have Louis Grimaldi, who is the Prince of Monaco. And last but not least, we have Nate Archibald, who is also an heir to a huge billionaire family. And he's just, you know, rich boy, pretty face. He's the epitome of rich boy, pretty face. And we love that for him. Now you may be thinking, Shay, not all her exes were evil, but you would be wrong because, well, in my opinion, guys, this is just my opinion, but every one of Blair's exes has screwed her over, like royally screwed her over in one way or another. And maybe Blair's boyfriends were more prone to do this because she loves to scheme, she loves to meddle, and at a point they all get sick of that. But I don't think scheming and meddling has justified any of their behaviors or their actions towards her. Now, who is Blair's most evil boyfriend? In my humble opinion, it is, drumroll please, Louis Grimaldi. Let me explain why. So Blair and Louis meet when she's on one of her legendary European trips. She is in Paris and they have this little meet cute when she's like gazing at a painting and he comes next to her and they strike up a chat and he asks her out. Okay, so this is the point where I'm already pissed off because on the date they go on, it's a double date, right? Louis brings his chauffeur with him and Louis is the Prince of Monaco. He's a Grimaldi, but in order to test Blair, who he quite literally just met, in order to test her, he pretends that his chauffeur is the prince and that Louis is the chauffeur. And this is kind of a double date because Serena is in Paris with Blair at the current time. So Serena kind of talks to the chauffeur. They have their own little thing going on. And Blair is supposed to be on the date with Louis. My thing is Blair comes from New York royalty. And I'm sure that Louis is aware of this at this point in time. So why, realistically, why would she date a chauffeur? That doesn't make any sense. I need him to be so serious for a second. Also, knowing how snobby and elitist his family is. Remember Beatrice? Oh my God, I hated that girl. Also his mom, like they're very elitist and that's okay. They come from a royal family. I'm sure that's the way things are. So in his mind, while he's doing this test on Blair to make sure that she's genuine or whatever, why would he go for a girl whose family would be okay with her dating a chauffeur? Louis, what are you testing here? I simply don't understand. I really don't get it. Also, Serena is actively, like, she's talking to the chauffeur, who she thinks is royalty at this point, but even when he was a chauffeur, she didn't mind. Louis' family would never let him bring home a girl like Serena because she's too carefree. So then why would you, like, why plot this whole thing? It, like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. So Blair fails the test, obviously. When she learns that Louis is a chauffeur and his friend is the prince, allegedly, she starts talking to his friend instead. Louis calls her out on it, and she's like, oh my God. And he's like, yeah, you failed the test. I want to date somebody who's gonna want to date me for me. And I hate that Blair does this, but she literally begs for another chance. Is this who we are? Is this who we are, madame? So they do end up going on another date, just them two, but Blair can't stay long in Paris after this, like while they're trying to date, because Chuck is having another one of his like meltdowns. She rushes to like help him. So her and Louis do leave on good terms, and she even has this cute little Cinderella moment where she gives him one of her beautiful heels, and she's like, well, if you're ever in New York, come find me. And that's really cute. I mean, it's a little bit extra, but she is the queen of bougie. She is Blair Waldorf, so I'll allow it. So a couple episodes later, Louis arrives in Manhattan with that damn shoe, and he finds Blair. They start dating. It's really cute, but they have to keep things under wraps because Louis is not supposed to be in New York, and he sure as hell is not supposed to be dating Blair Waldorf. So because they kind of have to keep their relationship under wraps, at this event, she kisses Dan. It spreads like wildfire with Gossip Girl, photographers, press, whatever. And Louis gets mad because he finds out that Dan has feelings for Blair, but it's like, you know, she doesn't have feelings for him. And you know, she did that for you to ward off the press, and now you're mad. Like, it's not her fault that she is in demand. She was trying to help you. This is one thing in Gossip Girl that happens a lot. They use kissing as a trope to like ward people off, and it always ends up in mess. Do you remember that one time where I think it was Jenny and Juliet were trying to pretend that they were Serena at this like masquerade ball, and they both kissed Nate? Or swapping of saliva is not necessary. Please think of something else. But I will still stand by what Blair did because she got the press off their back. Why are you mad? If you should be mad at anyone, it's Dan for not respecting boundaries, okay? Anyways, he does end up forgiving her, and they are back together. Not long after, Louis' mom does come into town, and right off the bat, she hates Blair. Right off the bat. It's kind of funny, actually. Louis' mom hates her because she is not royalty. And my thing is, Louis, he would be like, I don't know how old Louis is supposed to be. I would say at least like 21. I mean, he looks a lot older, but no offense. But you're an adult at this point. You know your family wouldn't accept you dating a commoner, regardless of how rich they are. So then why bring Blair into this mess? Now she's going through emotional turmoil because her potential mother-in-law despises her. Come on, Louis, let's think. Louis, let's think. Me personally, you will never catch me in mother-in-law beef, because if the person that I'm dating allows her mother to have this much influence, this much impact, this much say in our relationship, and she's going to be an asshole about it, I'm blocking everybody and I'm going ghost, bitch. I'm not letting a man and his family stress me out. I've had enough of family stress growing up, okay? I don't need more. Thank you. Thank you. Anyways, we know Blair, we know she's a type A, she's a perfectionist, and she's a people pleaser. Also, she really wants to be a fucking princess. So she keeps on trying with Sophie, who's Louis' mom, and eventually they kind of become BFFs. Like, she really did good. Sophie ends up liking her. If anybody knows the timeline in which Blair and Louis dated, please let me know, because I'm not too sure. He proposes to her like really shortly after, so I'm like, how long did you date her for? Maybe that's like a royal thing. I don't know. That's when the whole pregnancy debacle happens, where she's pregnant. Dan's kind of helping her through it as a friend, although like he has feelings for her. So she eventually does find out that the baby is Louis. The reason why she was unsure whose baby it was, there's a little bit of scandal, a little bit of adultery going on, but we'll talk about that in Chuck's section. Unfortunately though, Blair does lose the baby in a car accident, which they didn't touch on enough. Why would you make her pregnant, dive deep into this pregnancy storyline, and then just not mention it again? It doesn't make any sense. Same thing with her eating disorder storyline. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that. The Gossip Girl writers just evidently love giving Blair unresolved trauma. So we are now in season 5, and Louis' mom is still being a pain. Yeah, her and Blair had their little bestie moment, but she's still quite not on Blair's team, and this is stressing Blair out so much that she wants to call off the wedding, but unfortunately she does stay. At this point, Louis is officially in his insane era, where he pays, Chuck is going to therapy now, by the way, how amazing, where he pays Chuck's therapist to not help him, to actively sabotage his life, sabotage his friendship with Blair, so that he is out of the picture forever. What happened to communication? You really think this is a good foundation for a stable relation, for a stable marriage even, sir? Come on. Anyways, Chuck eventually finds out what Louis is doing and he exposes him, and Blair gets really, really scared because Louis is turning into what Chuck used to be. He's turning evil. Blair and Louis do end up working things out, which is really unfortunate because he's been showing some clear signs of abuse. At one point, he tried to get her to stop seeing her friends, which is insane. Like, these are her best friends she's had since she was a child. What are you doing? You think you can just prance in and like isolate her? No. So the dreaded wedding day comes, and mid-wedding there is a Gossip Girl blast which portrays a video literally to everybody in the wedding, and it shows Blair confessing her love for Chuck Bass.
Of course I love you, Chuck. I've always loved you. I love you more and more every day. If it's even possible to love someone that much.
So this is where Blair becomes a runaway bride. She runs away but does end up coming back. They end up getting married, and she's speaking to Louis after the wedding, and she's like, I've made a vow to you. I promise that I'm gonna try to make this work. But then Louis, he's in his Hades era. He's like gone to the point of no return at this point. He's like, girl, that was only a contract. You have embarrassed my family name, and if you do anything like this again, if you try to divorce me, you're going to have to pay this massive fucking dowry. This dowry is fucking insane. I've done a little bit of Googling and seeing other people's thoughts who've watched this show, sort of trying to estimate how much this dowry would have been. I'm not gonna reveal the amount just yet. We will talk about that in Chuck's section. I just kind of want to keep the element of surprise a little bit because Chuck has a lot to do with this whole dowry situation. Louis like, I will financially ruin the Waldorfs. I don't give a fuck. He's like, id gaff. At this point, it's very, very obvious that Louis hates her. Yeah, she embarrassed your family, but it's not worth, in my opinion, putting them into insane financial. The Waldorfs would in no world have been able to afford this dowry, right? Chuck Bass, he does end up paying the dowry. We will discuss that later in Chuck's section, and thankfully Blair is able to break things off with Louis, and we don't see him again, thank God. That is the end of Louis Grimaldi's story. So where is he ranked? We're going in order, bitch. He's the most evil. I don't even need a... In my opinion, Louis is in fact Blair Waldorf's most evil boyfriend. So let's move on to the next evil boyfriend. Who do you think it is? I believe Blair's next most evil boyfriend is Chuck Bass. Hey, I'm Chuck Bass. You don't know me? I'm Chuck Bass. So Chuck Bass is not a good person in any sense of the word. However, his redemption arc went fucking bonkers. Let's talk about it. My issue with Chuck's character is that if they were going to give him this incredible redemption arc, why make him attempt to like R-word Jenny in the first season? I think it was even the first episode of this TV show. That is irredeemable, which is why he is so low on my list. This man has committed so many atrocities, so many fucking crimes. Realistically, he should be in federal prison, and I know he apologized, and I know he becomes a good person, and I am taking this into account. If we separate good Chuck from bad Chuck, then absolutely Chuck would be Blair Waldorf's best boyfriend, her best suitor, if you will, but that's not how this works. So yeah, he is Blair's second most evil boyfriend. So we first get an inkling that there's something going on between Chuck and Blair when Blair and Nate break up in season 1. She goes to this bar, I think it's called Victrola, that Chuck is trying to buy because that's what high schoolers do, apparently. She gets on the stage, she does a little dance with Chuck watching her, looking extra disgusting and slimy, and they go hook up in the back of his limousine. So she does try to forget about him because, ew, Chuck Bass. But slowly as time passes, she realizes that, yeah, there is mutual attraction there. They do have feelings for each other. So she decides to give it a go. And her and Chuck start dating, and that is the beginning of Chair. So now that Nate and Blair have broken up, Nate sees her being a little bit more upbeat. She's acting a little lighter. She's a lot more happy. Obviously because she's hooking up with Chuck. Like, nobody knows about this, by the way. Nate's beautiful, beautiful dumbass, because he sees she's happy, tries to get back with her, and he goes to ask Chuck for advice. And Nate knows nothing, and Chuck is a really bad friend, so he doesn't give him good advice. He actively tries to sabotage any prospect of Nate and Blair getting back together. As a result, though, he ends up fucking himself, and Blair sees that he's still immature, so Chuck literally drives her back into Nate's arms, and now she's dating Nate again. Good job, Good job, sir. What's Nate and Blair's ship name? Nair? Blate. It's not giving, but Blate are back together now. So now that Blair and Nate are back together, she doesn't want to tell Nate about her extracurricular activities with Chuck. Chuck decides to hold this over her head. Boyfriend material, am I right? Am I right, ladies? As a result of this, Blair ends up sort of sabotaging her relationship with Nate. They have this huge fight, and who is there filming in the corner if not for Vanessa Busybody Abrams? I have an issue. Side note, I have an issue that the only main black character, I mean, she's light skinned, but she's still black. The only black character in this television show, they wrote her to be the most annoying fucking person ever. Well, she's not the most annoying, but she's one of the most annoying. She's just always there in people's business. Anyways, Chuck tries to buy this footage of Vanessa, but she dupes him, takes his money. You go, girl. Love that. It's giving Robin Hood a little bit, but for her own self-interest. But whatever, Chuck deserves it. He's not a good person. So she dupes him and she gives the footage to Blair instead. Chuck later tells Gossip Girl that Blair hooked up with him and Nate right after one another. This is high school, so things are blown out of proportion. She wasn't with Nate when her and Chuck slept together. Obviously, it blows up into this huge thing. Could you imagine a guy you never even dated trying to ruin your life like this? Me personally, I may have to catch a case. Oh my god, I'd be so mad. But that's her man's, I guess. Future husband, ladies and gentlemen, that's wild. Nate did not know that Chuck and Blair had hooked up, so he gets into a fight with Chuck and he breaks up with Blair. At this point, Blair literally has no one to turn to. The only person she can think of to talk about her feelings to is Chuck. She's like, I'm defeated, you ruined my life, I don't have anybody else but you to turn to. And Chuck is like, bitch, huh? You do not have me. I hate this because Chuck is literally throwing her away because he does not find her interesting anymore. She's no longer his little toy that he can play with, so he's throwing her away. I hate him. I hate him. Imagine if this is you. Imagine the guy you literally just hooked up with ruins your life and then you go to him for some sort of solace and he turns you away in the most disgusting way. Oh my god, I'd be so mad. I'd be so pissed. Anyways, later down the road, Georgina, famous trickster, famous life ruiner, she comes back into town and she attempts to ruin Serena's life and she low-key succeeds. Blair and Chuck eventually realize hey, this was Georgina's doing, and they come together after not speaking for a little while and they team up to take Georgina down. It's always a scheme that brings them together. So Nate and Chuck also kind of reconcile. Nate is finally okay with it, so then he goes on to tell Blair that he still has feelings for her, and they reconcile and they start dating again, and my god, Blair's in the trenches. I really cannot believe that she forgave him, but he's a billionaire, so I'm thinking that most definitely clouded her judgment. The thing with me is though, I may forgive a billionaire for trying to ruin my life, but then I'd play the long game, make him fall in love with me, and then I'd divorce him and then take half his money. Like Jeff Bezos' wife. I'm kidding. I would never date a billionaire. Ooh, no. So not long after, Chuck starts letting his daddy issues get in the way of him and Blair's relationship. We are in the first season and look what this man has already put her through. Don't piss me off. So at the end of season 1, Chuck and Blair have planned to go to Europe and Blair leaves first. Chuck is freaking out about this relationship, and instead of telling Blair, hey, I don't want to go to Europe with you anymore, he literally doesn't say anything, lets Blair jet off, and he decides to flirt with one of his dad's employees instead. So in the beginning of season 2, we catch up with Blair, and she's been holidaying without Chuck, still incredibly pissed that he had ditched her. Meanwhile, Chuck has been whoring it up in the Hamptons during the holidays, which I feel would make a really good name for a reality show. Whoring it up in the Hamptons. So Blair eventually does come back to the Hamptons, but she has a lord. She has a British lord on her arm. His name's Marcus. We'll get into him a little bit later. Obviously, Chuck's stupid ass gets jealous. I really just cannot with this man. I really can't. You need to make up your mind with quickness. Thank you. Thank you. So as a result, Chuck does try to sabotage the relationship because he realizes that he's lying, but he's not really lying about anything bad, and it ends up going in Marcus's favor with Blair even more obsessed with him. So this is so fucking ridiculous. At one point, Chuck meets with Blair in a dark room. He puts on a British accent and pretends to be Marcus, and then they make out. That is a crime. That is literally sexual harassment. Am I wrong? I'm not. Exactly. Time passes and Blair and Marcus do end up breaking up. At this point, Blair wants to ruin Vanessa's life. She loves a scheme. She loves a debacle. So she enlists everybody's favorite friend-of-situationship, Chuck Bass, to help her. But Chuck wants to be a good guy all of a sudden, and he ends up helping Vanessa instead. He literally bought an entire bar. He bought out an entire bar to help Vanessa. So Blair's like, okay, let me give Chuck Bass one more chance. And Chuck is like, okay, I'm willing to do that, but you need to tell me you love me first. I need to hear the 3 words, 8 letters. Blair can't do that. She can't tell him that she loves him. And he's like, okay, well then we can't get back together. Loser behavior. Literal loser behavior. Anyways, moving on. At this point in season 2, Chuck's dad dies. So, you know, he's very emotionally volatile and he kind of goes on a rampage this season, but like, when is he not on a rampage, to be fair? Unluckily for Chuck, Blair and Nate do end up getting back together, and Chuck is really like freaked out about this. He gets jealous, so he decides to hook up with Vanessa, which is so random. A lot of people think that Blair and Dan are the most random couple, or like the most random hookup in this show. I think it's Vanessa and Chuck. Cause what the actual fuck? Like, Chuck is the direct opposite of what Vanessa stands for. I really don't understand. So then one of Serena's scammer boyfriends come into town. This is Gabriel, by the way, played by Armie Hammer. If you want a little bit more details on that, go watch my Serena video. Blair and Chuck have another one of their classic team-ups to take Gabriel down. So Nate starts to get pretty jealous, as it seems like her and Chuck are getting closer together, and honestly, I think he's right and he should say it. At least he's able to talk out his feelings and doesn't like go in sabotage. For whatever reason, Blair decides to ask Chuck what he still feels for her. His response makes her really emotional. She starts to cry, and I'm like, girl, why are you even asking Chuck this question? You know that he is in love with you. I don't get it. So the thing Chuck says to her is that I do not love you and the whole thing was just a game to me. Obviously he doesn't mean this, but he's trying to protect his heart by literally destroying Blair's. Blair shouldn't be asking him these questions because she is in a relationship with Nate, but Chuck shouldn't have said that. And even if he did want to lie to protect his feelings, he could have said it in a nicer way. Girl, fuck Chuck Bass. All my homies hate Chuck Bass. Yeah, exactly. Having Bart Bass as a father, having Jack Bass as an uncle, and not having a mother figure in his life, it would have for sure fucked Chuck up. He cannot emotionally regulate. He cannot express his feelings. He cannot communicate. So I do feel bad for him in that sense, but he should not have put Blair through this shit. It's bizarre. It's bizarre and it sucks, and he's a bad person. So at this point in time, Chuck's redemption arc is in full force. It is prom time for the kids at their schools, and he is trying his best to make sure that even though he is not with her, that Blair has the prom of her dreams. Around this time in season 2, Blair and Jack Bass, Chuck's uncle, also hook up. It's done off screen though, and I'm really confused because isn't Blair supposed to be like 17 at this point? Maybe she's 18, but even then, that's like really weird. Isn't Jack 30 or something? Jobless. Jack Bass gives the same energy as that one graduate from high school that cannot leave it alone, that comes back and is like chatting with the teachers and thinks he's super cool and like goes to high school parties. Go hang out with people your own age, please. Please. In the season finale, Gossip Girl reveals that Blair slept with Jack and that Chuck slept with Vanessa. Chuck decides to throw a hissy fit, even though he slept with Vanessa because of misogyny, I guess, and he jets off to Europe. While in Europe, though, he does eventually come to his senses and he's like, oh, I love this girl, and he goes to a bunch of her favorite stores, buys her a bunch of gifts, and everything's all good on the Blair and Chuck front. They get back into a relationship. At the beginning of season 3, we meet up with the happy couple, and they're playing this weird, flirty mind games where Chuck pretends to be interested in other girls, and then Blair comes in and embarrasses them. Is this what rich people do? Rich people for sure do a lot worse, so I shouldn't be surprised by this weird like sex game they have. As their relationship progresses, Chuck begins to delve more and more into his work, and as a result he has less and less time for Blair, which is really unfortunate. At a point, there's this one art piece that Blair really wants, but Chuck also really wants it. So they go to an auction and they're kind of like battling it out. Serena ends up winning the auction. She gets the painting and she ends up giving it to Blair, who then gives it to Chuck because love, I guess. Girl, stand up. Stand up. What has this man done for you that is worth giving him this painting? Please be so for real, Blair, please. Maybe if I had the amount of money she has, I would be as delusional. I don't know. So at this point, they've both graduated high school. Blair's struggling at NYU. Chuck also makes a huge risk. He cashes out all his shares in Bass Industries and decides to buy the Empire Hotel. He sees Blair struggling and he goes as far as to call the paparazzi on her just to make her feel herself again, to remind herself of who she is, that she is a queen bee. She is that bitch. She is the girl who she thinks she is. So yeah, that really helps her out mentally. So it's now the 1-year anniversary of Chuck's dad's death, and he is quite emotionally volatile at this point. He distances himself from Blair. This is also the point in the series where Trip and Serena are dating, and he crashes a car and leaves her on the side of the road to die. Serena's in the hospital on the year anniversary of Bart's death, and it really triggers a lot of stuff for him because literally 1 year ago he was in the hospital mourning his father. Chuck eventually does let people in. Finally, he's growing. He lets his family and friends comfort him. Chuck also goes to visit his dad's grave, and he sees a woman there putting flowers on his gravestone. Chuck is like, could this be my mother? It's a whole thing, but like he gets in contact with her and they try to work things out. So now we've come to the part of the show where Chuck's past really comes to catch up with him. The hotel that he used to live at, and he owns the Palace Hotel, some of the female employees there, they file a sexual assault lawsuit against him. And I'm so glad that they choose to address this stuff in Chuck's redemption arc, because this show loves to ignore shit like this. Anyways, it turns out that this was all a ploy to get Chuck to hand over ownership of the hotel to his mom, Elizabeth. She has been working with Jack Bass, his uncle, evil, this entire time. And Elizabeth is not his mom. It was all a lie. She lied.
Guys, it was all a lie. She lied.
So Jack eventually tells Chuck that, okay, I'll give you back your hotel if you let me sleep with Blair. This man is so unserious. Once again, go hang out with people your own age. You could be in Europe on a yacht right now with beautiful women around you, and this is what you're choosing to do. This man is so unserious, but you know what's even more unserious? Chuck Bass, because he agrees to let Jack sleep with Blair. And the thing is, it tracks with everything that Chuck has done up until this point. Are we surprised? No. So Chuck meets up with Blair and he presents this idea to Blair by omitting. He's like, Jack is only gonna give me the hotel back if you sleep with him, but I don't want you to do that. But the thing is, Chuck knows how much Blair feels for him. He knows that she'll do it anyway. So Blair goes on to meet with Jack, and Jack tells her everything, like, yeah, Chuck knew that you would say yes. He presented it to you in a certain way, so you wouldn't think that. Blair runs away so sad, so shocked at the audacity of this idiot named Chuck Bass. You bitch. When Blair confronts Chuck about it, he's like, well, technically I didn't ask you to do it, and you cheated on me. You cheated on me with Jack, not knowing that Blair didn't do anything at this point. And Blair is so confused because she loves Chuck so much, but she simply cannot forgive him for doing what he did. So thankfully, Blair does break things off with him, and Chuck goes straight back to being a whore. Are we surprised? No. Nothing new, same old shit. So Chuck and Blair do avoid each other for a while, but once again, a scheme brings them back together. And this is the one where they try to expose Serena's dad, William, for faking Serena's mom, Lily's cancer diagnosis so he could be with the family again. Every male figure in this show is just so fucked up, except for Cyrus Rose. We love Cyrus. So yeah, they're talking again, and Chuck is like, at 7 p.m. on this day, meet me at the top of the Empire State Building, and we can be together again, dumbass. Anyways, Blair is set to go to meet up with Chuck because she realizes she loves him too much, but just as she's about to go, Dorota, her mother / maid, she gives birth, so she's running quite a bit late, and Chuck goes to hook up with Jenny Humphrey, Dan's sister. Why? She's literally Blair's mortal enemy at this point. The thing is, he knows Blair's pressure points. He knows the ways to hurt her, and he just continues doing this over and over and over again. It's so sad. Not too long after, Chuck meets up with Blair and realizes that she was gonna go to the Empire State Building. He is about to propose to Blair with this massive rock from Harry Winston, I think. But just as he is about to do that, Dan comes in and punches the shit out of Chuck. This is how Blair finds out, by the way. This really fucks with her because once again, Blair is her mortal enemy. So she's like, nah, fuck Chuck, fuck you. I don't want to be associated with you anymore. And Chuck jets off to Prague, and he gets beat up and shot by a couple of hoodlums who steal the ring that he was going to propose to Blair with. And that is how season 3 ends. So we are now onto the beginning of season 4, and Chuck has been living in Prague under a fake name, Henry, and dating and living with this beautiful French woman named Eva. At this point, he is wanting to start a new life and sell off everything he has, but he decides not to after bumping into Blair and having a conversation with her. Chuck decides to drop the fake name. He tells Eva Eva everything, and they end up flying to New York together. So Eva is a beautiful soul, and she's been influencing Chuck in very positive ways. Pretty much as soon as he gets back to New York, he's starting charities, donating, he's doing amazing things for people. Blair is now super jealous, which I feel like is a little out of character for her because of everything Chuck has done to her. But I feel like maybe she's mad at the fact that Chuck gets a happy ending after ruining her life. So she tries to sabotage their relationship. She ends up breaking them up. One time it doesn't work, but the next time she actually succeeds. And it starts this like massive war between her and Chuck. And he vows to ruin her life. Like, you haven't already done that in the past, sir. Come on. So while Blair and Chuck are having this back and forth, they're both trying to sabotage each other. It builds for some sexual tension, and they end up starting to hook up, which is like not surprising in the slightest. Every time there's like a scheme going on, anytime there's any kind of tension, they manage to turn it into sexual tension. It kind of just hints at the fact that they probably do belong together. Time passes, they're still hooking up, and they end up professing their feelings for each other, but they realize that they can't get back together because of school and their careers. So Chuck ends up dating the beautiful Raina Thorpe, played by Tika Sumpter. Chuck and Raina date for a while, and eventually they do break up, and then Chuck realizes, oh my god, I want Blair back, but Blair doesn't want to get back with him. This is around the point that Blair and Dan are kind of a thing. Like, there are some feelings lingering. Dan is like straight up in love with her, but she's still denying her feelings because like he's Dan Humphrey. So Blair soon starts dating Louis Grimaldi, and he comes with his own issues, as we know. And they get engaged. Yeah, Chuck Bass. Yeah, he did what you couldn't. How's it feel? So at some point in season 4, while Blair is still engaged to Louis, Russell Thorpe, Raina's dad, Raina, the woman that Chuck just dated, he's a really bad man. So he holds Blair hostage in a building and he threatens to set it on fire. Thankfully, the gang, they show up just in time to rescue Blair. Afterwards, Blair and Chuck go to have a drink, and whoopsie, they end up hooking up. They discuss that, yeah, we still do have feelings for each other, but Blair's like, things with Louis are easy. She deserves to be happy. She deserves to have a peaceful relationship. So thankfully, Chuck has grown. He's matured to the point where he's like, okay, and he lets them be. He leaves Blair alone. The first good thing he has done for Blair this entire series. Can we get a round of applause? Finally. It only took you 4 seasons. So on to season 5, this is where Blair finds out that she is pregnant, and she's not sure whether it's Louise or Chuck's, because she did hook up with Chuck while she was engaged to Louis. But at this point, Chuck is going through some mental issues where he cannot feel anything, like both physically and emotionally. So instead of going to therapy like a normal person, he hires some men to beat him up. I'm just like, sir, you literally have all the money in the world. You can't find a therapist? Like, this is your go-to, but listen, let me not do too much, because he does end up going to therapy. This is when Louis tries to sabotage his relationship with Blair. And he also gets a cute little dog, Monkey, and he finally starts to feel things again. So this is around the time where Louis' evil era starts, like I said, with him paying Chuck's therapist to try to sabotage his relationship with Blair. Blair realizes that Louis is coming more and more like Chuck, or old Chuck, evil Chuck, every single day. She dives back into the relationship with Louis to try to bring him back to his old self again. To do so, for whatever reason, she starts hanging out with Chuck to observe the good things he's been doing so that she can kind of take notes and try to apply it to Louis. This is so fucking ridiculous. We know that Blair's still not over Chuck at this point. They still do have feelings for each other. She asks Chuck, would you be able to love another man's baby? But Chuck's like, stay with him. Thank you, Chuck, for being a decent human being for once in your life. He lets them be. Not for too long though, because Chuck's like, no, I'm in love with her. I have to get her back. So they start talking about everything. They get in a limo. They're like, no, we can do this. We can make this work. And this is a point where their limo crashes, and unfortunately Blair does lose her baby. So in the next episode, we find out that Blair is fine, but Chuck is in a coma, and this really sends Blair into emotional turmoil. Not because she lost a baby, but because Chuck may die. And this is so fucked up. Writers, why'd you do this? Why did they focus on this plot point? She just lost her child. What is going on? Anyways, Blair prays to God, and she's like, God, if you let Chuck survive, then I will go through with the vow that I made to you. I am going to marry Louise' bitch ass. She didn't say it in those exact words, but I think you get the point. So we know, obviously, Chuck, he ends up surviving this whole ordeal. Blair is really serious about that vow that she made to God, so she keeps her distance. The amount of signs that has been sent for them not to be together is astronomical, but neither of them are getting the hint. So fast forward to the day of Blair and Louis' wedding. Blair's having a private conversation where she kind of spills her guts. She is still in love with Chuck, and Georgina's ass is in the corner and she tapes it. And this is the video that plays right as Louis and Blair are about to say their I do. So it results in Blair running away, but we know she eventually comes back. They say their I do. There's a dowry thing. Louis now despises her, yada, yada, yada. The most important thing though is that Chuck offers to pay this dowry and Blair refuses, but Chuck goes on to pay anyways, freeing her from the hands of an evil man into the hands of a reformed evil man. Could be worse, I guess. Okay, now let's talk about the exact amount that people estimate this dowry to be, because it was never mentioned. It was never mentioned in the Gossip Girl series. So knowing that it could bankrupt the Waldorfs, their net worth is about 200 million, I believe. Obviously that stuff is never stated, but like that's just what people think. And people estimate that the dowry is in the 1 billion, 1.5 billion with a B. The Waldorfs would have never been able to pay that, but Chuck, who's estimated to be worth like 20 billion, he would have been able to pay that. A huge chunk of his net worth, but he did do that. Insane. And I feel like knowing Blair, knowing Chuck, that kind of pays for everything he's done to her in the past. If you get my drift, $1 billion is so much money. Oh my God. Like obviously emotional turmoil, you can't put a figure on that, but for $1 billion, call me stupid, call me a bitch, call me a whore, sure. Give me the dollar. And it's at this point in the story where I'm like, okay, maybe Chuck does deserve her. Unfortunately for Chuck though, as soon as he pays this dowry, Blair's like, actually I'm in love with Dan now. Sorry, and do I feel bad for Chuck? No, I don't, not one bit. Not one bit. Anyways, a scheme brings them back together once again. This is around the time where Chuck realizes that Diana, Nate's boss, could potentially be his mother. So they go on a little investigation and they find out that Chuck's dad, Chuck's father, Bart Bass, is still alive.
Oh my God!
Blowing my mind. So Bart tells him that he has to go into hiding because one of his competitors were out to get him and his family. So they sort this whole thing out, and Bart Bass is back in Manhattan and he's back large and in charge. Anyways, a little bit later, Bart and Chuck are talking and Bart tells him that he bought back the engagement ring that he was going to give to Blair from Harry Winston. I don't think I mentioned this, but since the whole Prague thing, Chuck found the ring. He ended up selling it back to Harry Winston. Bart ended up buying back the ring and he gave it to Chuck. And we think, maybe Bart's actually a good person, but it doesn't last for long because later in the episode, Bart holds this press conference and he basically announces to the world that he is taking back complete control of Bass Industries. You've been missing for years, dude. This little boy, he's like 21. He's been holding your fucking $1 billion company afloat and you're just gonna, what, take it back from him? Not even gonna consult him first? This man was literally on holiday in hiding for years just to come back and take back the cup. Like, are you kidding me? Anyways, we are now at the end of season 5 and Chuck and Blair are back together. So we are now in the final season of Gossip Girl. We meet up with Chuck and Blair, and while they are like together, technically, they're not quite in a relationship because they're like, we need to get to stable points in our careers before we get back together. So throughout this season, Chuck's aim is to take back control of Bass Industries, and he goes through insane lengths to do this. So we find out that years and years ago, Bart made this really dodgy deal with some guys in the oil and gas industry, which involved a lot of money and deaths. And Chuck lets Bart know that, oh, I'm aware of this. I'm aware of all of this. As a result of this, Bart attempts to kill Chuck by making sure that his plane goes down. Thankfully, Chuck didn't get on the plane, but like other people died. You're willing to sacrifice your son for a couple Billy? Come on, man. Chuck ends up confronting his father and they have that legendary roof fight with Blair cowering in the corner like Gia from Euphoria. So at some point, Bart tries to swing at Chuck and he misses, ending up dangling at the side of this building, begging Chuck to help him, begging him to take his hand and hoist him up. But Chuck's like, I'm gonna stay right here, I think. And Bart falls, and that is the actual end of Bart Bass. So now Chuck and Blair have to go into hiding because there are police literally everywhere. Like, this is Bart Bass, this is a New York mogul. So they run away. It's actually such an excellent scene. It gives me goosebumps every single time I watch it. Blair and Chuck are on the run, and Bonnie and Clyde is playing in the background. Ugh, excellent. Excellent scene. So we've now come to the series finale. Oh, I freaking love this episode so much. Even just talking about it makes me so like I literally have goosebumps. We have now come to the season finale. Blair and Chuck have left the city. Chuck's uncle meets up with them and suggests they get married because if Blair's his wife, she can't testify against him. I don't know if that's true, but that's how it is in the laws of Gossip Girl land, so I'm just accept it. So Chuck proposes to Blair and she accepts, and I love this episode so much because it's literally just the whole gang of running around the city trying to put together this beautiful impromptu wedding. So they have this gorgeous tiny wedding in a park, and Blair and Chuck say their I do's right before the police come and take them away. Later, everyone's at the penthouse in this iconic scene where Dorota asks for a vodka on the rocks, and she asks Jack, yeah, put him to work. Lord knows that man doesn't know what that word is. In this iconic scene, we also find out that Danielle Humphrey is indeed the legendary, the iconic Gossip Girl. Not only that, but we find out that Bart's death will be ruled as an accident because there's not enough evidence, which, if you think about it, doesn't make any sense. Didn't this happen last night? They've gathered all the evidence saying that doesn't make any sense, but let's pretend. And yeah, they live happily ever after with their little son named Henry. Chuck really likes the name Henry. So at the end of the day, I do think Chuck and Blair are a good match, but that's only after all the effort that Blair put in, all the emotional turmoil that she went through, and Chuck waking up one day and randomly deciding to be a good person. Yes, he ends up becoming a good person. He ends up being a good match with Blair, but that doesn't take away all of the bad stuff he did, and as a result, I decided to place him as Blair's second most evil boyfriend. Ta-da! Yeah. Who do you guys think is Blair's next worst boyfriend? Marcus Beaton. Marcus Beaton is a British man that Blair met during the summer right before season 2. We're introduced to him at the beginning of season 2, where Blair brings Marcus to the Hamptons and they go to tea with the gang, and Blair is like very actively trying to make Chuck jealous. Her plan works when Chuck in fact does get jealous, and he gets little VDW, Eric, to dig up dirt on the man. At the white party later, Marcus even tells Blair that like, I know you don't like me that much, I know that you've been using me to make Chuck jealous, and the girl doesn't even try to deny it. She's like, yeah, I find you boring. Girl, you can't say that to people. Marcus ends up telling Blair that he has been lying to her about who he actually is. Marcus has been pretending to be a random American guy named James, but he reveals that he is in fact a lord. As far as like the British royal rankings go, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I just know that his family has a lot of money and power, and that his father is a duke and his mother is a duchess. Because of this new knowledge, Blair actually gives him a chance. She gets to know him. They eventually end up flying back to New York City, and they're still going strong. Unfortunately, this is the moment where Chuck is like, yeah, I'm gonna sabotage the fuck out of this relationship. He knows that Marcus's stepmom, the Duchess, is very young. She's very beautiful. So Chuck kind of sets up a meeting between them two, knowing that Blair hasn't met her yet. Blair kind of goes off at her and is incredibly judgmental. Knowing everything we know about the Duchess, eventually she has every right to be judgmental, but obviously this is her new boyfriend's mom, and she's just made a horrible first impression. She tries to apologize, but Catherine is having absolutely none of it. Surprise, Catherine is actually a fucking creep who has been hooking up with Nate basically the whole time she's been in New York. That's a child, ma'am. That's a child. Jail. Immediately. Thank you. Thank you. Blair eventually catches Catherine and Nate hooking up, so she uses this opportunity to blackmail her into being nice to her and letting Marcus know, hey, this is a good girl you're dating. Eventually, Blair feels that she kind of did all that for nothing because now her and Marcus are in a good place, they're having a great relationship, but Blair wants to take it to the next level. She wants them to consummate the relationship, but Marcus has zero interest in doing that, and she's just like, what the fuck? Later in the episode, like I've talked about before, Chuck puts on a fake British accent in a dark room and they make out. Girl, you know damn well that was Chuck Bass, come on. And she eventually does admit, yeah, I knew it was Chuck. But they still end up getting back together, or not getting back together, they were never broken up in the first place, but like things are kind of steady between Marcus and Blair. He forgives her for that whole debacle. Their happiness does not last too long though, because Vanessa, she's just always in the corner with her fucking camcorder. Now this is fucking insane if you've never watched this TV show, but she catches Marcus and his stepmom Catherine hooking up. What the fuck? That woman is diabolical. Somebody handcuff this woman, please. At the beginning, Nate wanted to hook up with the Duchess. He was like having a good time with her, but eventually he wants to stop and she doesn't let him because she has some insider information about her family that could get them in huge trouble. So Blair uses this newly gained information about the Duchess sleeping with her fucking stepson, and she uses it to protect Nate's family. Can we give a round of applause to Blair, the ultimate finesser? Like, she will protect her friends like her life depends on it, and I love that about Blair. So obviously Marcus and Blair are over now, and thank God for that. Marcus's ranking is in fact Blair Waldorf's third worst boyfriend. Yeah, that was really gross. The reason I put him here, even though like the relationship was very fleeting, it didn't last very long, I put him here because in the order of the horrible things that they've done to Blair, I feel like he kind of belongs in the middle. On to the next. Who do you think it is? There's only 2 people left. Oh my God. Please don't hate me, okay? Don't hate me for this. Next worst boyfriend is Daniel Humphrey. I view Dan Humphreys as her 4th most evil boyfriend, and I feel like people are gonna dislike this opinion of mine, but I'm one of the few Dare shippers. I really liked Dan and Blair together. Blair hates Dan in season 1, season 2, and season 3 because he's poor. In season 4, they finally kind of start getting along. They're both interning at W Magazine while they're both studying at NYU. And this is the first time really ever that Blair and Dan are kind of in forced close proximity to each other, just them two. So Blair kind of has no option but to finally become friendly with him. They bond on theater, poetry, literature. It's so beautiful. I really love that because I feel like we haven't really seen that side of Blair where she gets to bond with one of her love interests over the arts. And we know that she is very much so into the arts. I don't know. I just really like them together. We really got to see Blair's like really soft side. Slowly but surely, they eventually do start to catch feelings for each other, although they are both in denial because of their 3-season-long feud. So they end up in a situation where they're like, okay, let's just kiss, let's just make out to see whether the feelings are really there or not. So after they do this kiss, Blair literally just ghosts Dan. The thing with Dan is that he realizes that his feelings for Blair were in fact real, and he's kind of left to pine over her all by his lonesome while she's ghosting him. We find out that this kiss made Blair realize that she does not have feelings for Dan, and she truly does love Chuck. But Chuck's actions drive her away, which ends up leading her right into the arms of Louis. Blair and Dan stay friends while this whole Louis plotline plays out. She really helps her during this time with the whole pregnancy thing where she's not sure who the baby father is. Really helps her throughout the whole wedding debacle, even though we'll talk about that in a second. He's a bit of a nasty man. Even when Louis turns evil, he really provides a lot of emotional support towards her. And at this point, even Dan and Chuck are really good friends. Like, what is happening? Everyone loves Dan all of a sudden. And I think this is kind of when Dan is sort of solidifying his place in New York high society. He's a writer. His book was like huge. So he's kind of proving his worth to them. So yeah, everybody's really friendly, which is weird. So during Blair and Louis' wedding, when that video played of her confessing her feelings about Chuck, that ruined the wedding, essentially ruined Blair's life. Yeah, that was Dan's doing. Dan was the one who played the video. Fucking spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the whole, Dan is Gossip Girl, okay? He plays the video as Dan, not as Gossip Girl. He tells everyone that he was the one who sent the video into Gossip Girl, but that don't make no kind of sense, so he probably just took the video and uploaded it to the Gossip Girl website. And of course, Dan steps in where the whole wedding goes awry and she runs away, which is so fucking calculated and annoying. The most calculated being in this show. It's really fucked up. Her and Dan do get into a relationship, and Chuck tries to break them up by revealing that Dan is the one who played the video during the wedding and made everything go awry. For some reason, Blair could not care less though, and she continues to date Dan. That's so weird. The things that men have done to her that Blair has sidestepped is so sad. It's really sad. Like, who made her like this? So later in the season, Dan gets a writing fellowship in Rome, and then later Dan tells her that he loves her. She doesn't say much back. So Dan's dumbass doesn't even try to communicate with her. He doesn't wait for her to like figure out her feelings and give him a response, and he goes right back into the arms of Serena. They hook up, and Serena fucking films it. What is going on in the House of Commons? Blair has really gone through it, but that's kind of the end of their story for season 5. So in season 6, Dan is still very much pining over Blair, but Blair has unfortunately for Dan realized that her heart is with Chuck. Also, Serena's boyfriend's daughter, stay with me, she finds Serena and Dan's sex tape, and this girl likes mess, so she plays it during cotillion, and this causes Blair to go straight back to hating Dan. And that is the end of Dan and Blair. I really liked them together. I thought they had a really cute, bantery relationship. They had so much in common, and it was quite a wholesome relationship, obviously up until the end where he cheats on her with Serena. Her best friend, mind you. The amount of times this has happened to Blair, it happened with Nate, and it's happening with Dan. I'm just glad Chuck and Serena never hooked up, because that would drive me over the edge. And yeah, also at the end of the day, Dan is Gossip Girl, so regardless of anything, the relationship is inherently fucked up because he is Gossip Girl. So yeah, that brings me to the conclusion that Daniel Humphreys is Blair's fourth most evil boyfriend. And that leaves one last person, and like in my Serena video, that person is none other than Nathaniel Archibald. Yes, Nate is, in my opinion, Blair's least evil boyfriend, also her best boyfriend, but he has still done shitty things to her. In the first season, we meet Nate and Blair when they are in a relationship. Little does Blair know that previously he had cheated on her with her best friend, Serena Vanderwoodson, and has secretly been pining over her ever since. When Serena does come back into town at the beginning of season 1, Nate ends up confessing to Blair that, yeah, I cheated on you with Serena, and Blair forgives him. She is always so forgiving. It doesn't last very long though, because Nate realizes that he doesn't have feelings for Blair anymore, so he breaks up with her. At this point, Chuck and Blair start hooking up. We've talked about this before. Yeah, Nate sees that she's happy, so he wants to get back with her. So Nate enlists Chuck's advice, and Chuck being Chuck, he's like, no, Blair's mine now, and he actively tries to break her up. And like I said before, this just drives Blair straight into the arms of Nate, and they end up getting back together. So Chuck's bitch ass does not want Blair to prosper. If this is someone you love, wouldn't you want them to be happy? But anyway, Chuck actively plots against them, and he's like, if you stay with Nate, I will tell him that we hooked up. Even though that's not a bad thing. Yeah, like that's his best friend, but like low-key, she was just getting her lick back. You fuck my best friend, I fuck yours. What's wrong with that? I'm kidding. I support women's rights, but I also support the wrongs. What can I say? What can I say? Chuck is insane. That's her future husband, by the way. I just really can't with that man. That's so funny. Blair does end up distancing herself from Nate, but they stay together just for Nate to break up with her when he finds out that she slept with the bastard. The bastard. Get it? Bastard? So in season 2, Nate dates Vanessa for a while, but he breaks up with her, and him and Blair end up getting back together. With this bout of them dating, Nate's trust issues really come to the forefront while he witnesses Blair's scheming and plotting. As we know, scheming and plotting is what tends to get Blair and Chuck to become close again. So sort of as a result, Blair and Nate break up for the final time. So yeah, overall, Nate and Blair's relationship was a very much high school one. It was very sort of prim and proper. Their families loved each other. They were a good looking couple, and on paper they should have worked, but they just didn't. I feel like it's because Blair has that kind of dark side to her that Nate doesn't have. He's just like pretty boy, no thoughts, head up and too low-key. And that leaves Nate as Blair's least evil boyfriend. Overall, some of these relationships were super light in comparison to others. Like, I feel like of all the people on here, Blair only ever truly loved Nate, Louis, and Chuck, and I feel like she really only loved Louis for a very brief point in time. And then Marcus and Dan, they were just very, very light relationships, which is why I feel like they're so high up. I feel like if these relationships were longer, they would have probably done worse stuff to her. But yeah, this is my ranking. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Tell me in the comments below. I really, really want to know. That is the end of my Blair Cornelia Waldorf video. These are the suitors of Blair Waldorf being covered up by her gorgeous face right now though. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you'd like to follow me on my social medias, they will be in the description bar and at the end of this video. So I have so many video ideas. I'm so excited to get started on those. But if you have any shows, any movies you want me to watch, please let me know. I really want to know. I want to do videos that I want to make, but I also want to know what you guys want. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!